Over a century ago, William Allen White, the editor and journalist from Emporia, Kansas, wrote a little book called Boysville. It's based loosely on his own experiences growing up in the Flint Hills, and it's about a group of friends and their adventures in a small town in Kansas. In one of the stories, a young boy has lost the only member of his family, his father, and he's now homeless. Unable to cope with his grief, he spends his nights and days laying on the ground next to his father's grave. One day, the older sister of one of the young friends spies him and comes across the cemetery and holds out her hand and she says, "Let's go." And he looks up startled and he says, "Where to?" And she said, "Home, our home, yours and mine." Home is an incredibly powerful force in human history. The desire to belong is in all of us. In this film, we look at the stories and experiences and memories of a number of people whose homes are gone, whose homes were ephemeral, that don't exist anymore. With each passing day, we lose more of those memories. We ask them to tell us about their memories of their home. Did they keep anything of value to help them remember their home? And of course, the age-old question, is it possible to go home again? Today we want you to listen to their stories and think about how you can fill in the pieces of history that are quickly being forgotten about your story. Help us preserve your memories of home. Our home, yours and mine.
As silly as it sounds, I have a hammer. When the tornado basically destroyed our place, my father was, of course, picking up everything, and he was complaining because he couldn't find his claw hammer. And it would have originated with would have been my great-grandfather, and it had been passed down to Dad. So, being, I think I was 11 at the time, and wandering around out looking, I found the hammer, and just made his dad's day. But I still have the hammer.
It has a fascinating history because it's so far down on the Flint Hills, the southern part, very last, just before you come into Oklahoma.
I always rode a horse, and I got the old horse over there, and the kids dared me to ride that horse into the schoolhouse. Well, on the east side of the school building was what we call the cloakroom. There were steps up, 2 steps up, all concrete, on the corner of the building, and so they dared me to ride that horse in there, and they opened the door, and I had that horse halfway in there, and the teacher caught me, and I got banned again. Home meant a place that I had my parents, I had my brothers and sisters. I always had clothes, I always had food because we raised the food.
So when you talk about home, that's a strong word for us, and we're still not home. We're here in our homeland, but we're not home yet because we don't live here, and we're not part of the land again. And it's been very warm and dusty the last few days here in Kansas, and I was out here by myself yesterday, and I could feel that warm wind and that dust, and I realized that my relatives are buried all along through here, and that dust has the remains of my ancestors here. So we all breathe the dust of the Kaw people, the remains of the Kaw people, and that means a lot to me, knowing that we're literally a part of this land.
Since the ancestors are here, it's a very special place, and it's just awesome to dance on your own land at your former home. It is our old homeland. This was home for our ancestors. And when we we had to leave here in 1873. Excuse me. That makes me emotional. They say that the women moaned and cried for months because they didn't want to leave the bodies of their loved ones here. And Curtis, he always says that he can feel the spirits up here much more than he can in Oklahoma.
This structure here is representative of the 13 clans of our tribe. It's a place where we hold dances, the kind of dances that are real old and mostly war dance. And the land, a lot of our people are buried here. There are a lot of grave sites in this area, over this huge area that used to be ours. And they say that when the people learned that they were being moved to Oklahoma, they mourned for months because they didn't want to leave their people behind. Those that had crossed over to the other side. And so for me, it's important that we maintain a relationship with this land, the language as well that was spoken here.
It's a beautiful park that the Cause have put together, and I think if you ever get the chance to go out there, you just see these vast spaces with all of these remnants of buildings. And I think when you go there, it shifts from just this place that you're reading about to somewhere where you can really kind of put the story together and see this place where people called their home, and the pieces of that story that are still very much so alive. And plus it's just a very beautiful space, and usually when the sun is out and the wind is blowing, you can really kind of see that story and why people were there.
Chalk was kind of a faceless community to me, and when I made the discovery of John Crisp specifically, he became kind of the face of Chalk to me.
Well, I think all the things that we find up there are things that we can pass down to our next generation, to our grandkids and stuff, and they know enough about the things that Grandpa did and the things that he held dear to his heart, that we hope to be able to never let the place go to anybody other than family. And that's what his dad's wish was that it would pass down for generations to come, and there would always be a place for them to go to be. And my sons feel like today that when they go back up there, they feel closer to their dad.
A Memorial Day service that they used to have here from the HDU, that every year they had a potluck dinner, and then they'd put on a short program afterwards, and they would give awards away for the one that was the oldest here, the one that had traveled the farthest, and then they had a little memorial service for the ones that had died in the area or was buried out here in the cemetery.
Home is important, and the stories have been recorded within my family, but I look at this and meet some of the rich heritage that is in Wabunsee County, and I want those people to enjoy their homes and their history and their families just as much as I enjoy my home, my history, and my heritage from my family.
We discovered an old brick building along a little side road that had clearly been deserted. There were sort of trees growing out of it and poison ivy growing up the sides of it. But the brick walls were very impressive. They were really straight, and they obviously had endured a lot. And then people from the community began to tell us stories about it, and it was clear it had a real special spot in their hearts. They remembered going to the store for penny candy after school. They remember buying their king fishing pole every year from Otto Kratzer and from the store, and they remembered Otto. He was a very kind and generous man. He was a lot of fun. He was a trickster. He just was kind of the heart of the community.
The old saying that you can never go home again was a good title for a novel, but it's really not true. People go home all the time.
When I looked at the Otto Kratzer photos, and there was this one photo of an African-American cowboy, and he was just looking back at the camera, and I don't know why it just sort of hit a chord with me, and it made me want to research it more. It made me even more interested at that point.
You can't ever go home again. It's never the same. However, you can experience something that does bring back those memories.
Well, it was a good town, darn it. Had a lot of kids. That school was a pretty good sized school at Cedar Point. I was on the school board for 15 years, I think, and we did all we could do for it. I know we fixed it up. We even had a driver's ed there. Cars furnished us for that. Had pretty good coaches and stuff in the gym. And I just couldn't, and we had the swimming pool that nobody else had. We had it at Cedar Point. I just see in 2 churches at do one time. And the factories, my gosh, what they didn't make or do. Almost 100 people in town, I know at least.
These little towns aren't immune to the things that are plaguing the nation. When Texas fever hit the Midwest, it hit Juanetta, it hit Cedar Point, it hit the cattle herds throughout Kansas. So really what it made me understand is that even as where I come from and being one person, I can still make a difference in a big way.
Really, it was reading the diaries of the women who have lived in Kansas, seeing what they wrote, what they thought about, really drove home to me that these were real people who were just like me, just living in a different time, in a different place, and being able to connect with that was really meaningful on a personal level and also an academic level. And then getting to relate my personal passion for women's history to the work that I do at the Chapman Center, it's really cool.
As you're coming west and all of a sudden it opens up to you, the prairie. It is the most incredible feeling to me. I just feel like I'm home.
My grandfather actually grew up around here. He fished in the stream just down the river. He was actually born in the house right behind me, and he actually leased the general store too. And before he passed away when I was 2, he realized the history of what this town had, that it was settled by the Osage Indians, that people used to come here from Wichita to fish, and so he wanted to really put together a history timelining all of these events of what this town has been through, but unfortunately before he could finish, he passed away. And knowing that he had some of these artifacts that he dug up, I kind of put them together, decided to take what he started and completely finish his project. I used to come down here all the time as a kid because, you know, my grandparents are buried at the cemetery just down the road, and I'm related to most of the people in the cemetery too. So, you know, this has been close to my family for as long as I've known as well. I think it takes effort on your personal part to be able to go home again, because it is very easy to get swept up in the here and now. It's very easy to lose focus on what your purpose is in life. And sometimes it's important for us to take a step back and to think about our roots and where we've come from, and if we're being the person that we wanted to be when we were growing up.
Little town on the Republican River. It wasn't an important place. It was just another community that the people were attached to. And everybody has a different memory. As I said, they'll try to tell us that we all loved each other. No, we didn't love each other. We were real human people. And here again, I've been around too long. I remember too many things.